and Mr. P.S. Abdul Karim, CMD, a creative group based in Mumbai. And with this, let me also welcome all our colleagues from ICM and the different stakeholders, supporters of our initiatives, and especially this fortnightly webinars we have been organizing. So coming back to today's session, this is a very unique session because of course foreign employers are important component of migration cycle, but I think perhaps in the last 2 years this is a subject we did not discuss in detail. As I said that we have a fortnightly meeting on various subjects related to migration cycle. So this is actually more important for us to learn more than really share our experience, because it is something which is relatively new to us. So, but before that, let me add a brief background. What is India and GCC doing so far? I think GCC region is very, very important in terms of the numbers, where about 9 million Indians have been working there. They have been there. So that is important aspect. And we have the various MOUs with almost all the 6 Gulf Cooperation Council countries, which basically take care of the welfare and security and safe stay of our Indian workers. So in addition to this, what we are looking at is particularly in terms of the new situation which arose since March 2020, the COVID. So we are looking at trying to make the facilitation of migration smoother, though it is still yet to give the results. But in that aspect, one of the aspects is to see that how we can engage better with the foreign employers. So as I said that we have a digital platform called eMigrate, which was supposed to be basically for taking care of the needs of migration from India to 18 select countries. In our classification, we have they are called immigration clearance required countries. So where the people, Indians who are not having qualification good enough to take care of themselves. So basically we identified those people, and those people going to certain countries. So we came to conclusion that those are countries the Indians going need a special assistance. So the eMigrate was basically limited to those 18 countries, Indian going from India to those countries. But now, so on that basis, there are about 200,000 foreign employers from those 18 countries have already registered with eMigrate. So that facilitates the easy recruitment of Indian into those 18 countries. But now what we are looking at is to expand the scope of registration of foreign employers beyond these 18 countries, so they can register on eMigrate. So there will much more opportunities for Indian migrants beyond those 18 countries. So that started recently, and we are hoping that more and more foreign employers who are looking for Indian talent, Indian workforce, can have opportunity to register on eMigrate and recruit Indians directly. Of course, there are some other facilities without registering on eMigrate also. They can directly recruit and without going through our recruitment agents. So without going into this subject in detail, let me move on to say that COVID created a lot of difficulties, but at the same time, there are the change of dynamics, new opportunities. The employers, their own circumstances changed, and their own vision for the future changed. So their own outlook for recruiting of particular talent is changed. So this is very dynamic process. I think it is difficult to fathom at this stage. But I think this whole idea of today's meeting is to understand that what are these dynamics happening, and to listen from experts, particularly in the field, to understand so how to come up with solutions to meet the needs which are coming up. Just to add that my colleague, Mr. Vinay Kumar, would be talking more in detail about how this registration of foreign employers works on eMigrate. So I will not delve into that one. But with these few words, I am very much looking forward to hear from you, all of you, and to learn on this subject, which is relatively new for us, but it is very important in the new circumstances. With these few words, I want to thank everyone and warmly welcome for this discussion. And thank you so much, Surabhi and Priyadarshika for organizing this. Thank you once again.
Thank you, sir. Now, may I please request Ms. Surabhi Singh to actually start the technical session, please.
Thank you, Priyadarshika. A warm welcome to all of you who have joined us today for this panel discussion. First of all, let me introduce our distinguished panel. So we have today amongst us Mr. Muhammad Al Zarqani. He is the United Nations Resident Coordinator and Chief of Mission Bahrain. Mr. Paulo Salvai, Senior Employer Specialist, ILO Regional Office for Arab States. Mr. Simon Menzies, he's Senior Manager Employee Welfare Transgrad Group UAE. Vinay Kumar, our colleague from OEPG Division. And Mr. Abdul Karim, who is CMD of Creative Group. We have been doing a lot of panel discussions on various aspects of recruitment during the past 1 year. But what we have done and what we have generated over the past 1 year has been more of an internal discussion where we have engaged with recruiters, POEs, our various other stakeholders within the country. But we thought we should go a step beyond and hear from the other side of the spectrum and see how the FE foreign employers and the recruitment cycle operates from the other end. So that was the rationale with which we organized this discussion. And I'm so glad that we have amongst us a number of foreign employers joining us from various countries of the GCC region. So in this panel discussion, what I seek to do, and I seek the cooperation of our panelists today in this regard, is to look at 3-4 key areas where we would seek to really hear your views, which is in terms of the role of FEs in the recruitment cycle and the challenges that FEs might face, and how crucial is their role in ensuring fair and decent working conditions for migrant workers. We'll also look at the policy framework governing recruitment of FEs. Our colleague from MEA would be briefly covering that. We also seek to discuss strategies to improve the interface between recruiting agencies and foreign employers, and understand the recruitment process in the Gulf a bit better. We look forward to hearing Mohammed and Paolo, especially on this area. And we'll see towards the end how we can move ahead and the way forward in this regard. So those are my brief remarks. Each of you has about 10 minutes for your interventions. I'll give you a sort of an alert 8 minutes when 8 minutes are over so that you can wrap up. And for our participants who have joined today, we have chat box, as Priyadarshika already mentioned. We'll try and take as many interventions towards the end in the Q&A session. So without wasting much time, let me welcome Mohammed. Mohammed has a vast range of experience, especially in the Gulf. He joined the United Nations Development Program in 2010 to lead a joint project between UNCDF, UNDP, and Egyptian Ministry of Local Development. Since joining IOM in 2013, he has served as a program manager for a community stabilization initiative covering Egypt, Tunisia, and Libya, as head of programs in IOM Kuwait. And he's currently, as I have already introduced, the chief of mission of IOM Bahrain. So over to you, Mohammed.
Thanks very much, and thank you very much for the flattering introduction. I'm very happy to be here with you today, and I look forward to this very interesting and key discussion. I'm going to take initiative as the first speaker today to perhaps provide a little bit of context into which other parts of the discussion would come into place. The relationship with foreign employers and cooperation with foreign employers doesn't operate in a vacuum. It operates under a specific governance and migration management structure that guides and informs this relationship specifically with foreign employers. And it's very important that we try to touch upon what this current migration management is like, the reform agenda that is in the Gulf as well at this very moment across the board, as well as the nationalization priorities that have been at the center of most visions, plans in the Gulf countries, and then perhaps to discuss how the current situation and what are the challenges to those reform and how does that inform relationships and potential collaboration with the foreign employers. Now, everybody has heard enough about the sponsorship system, so I'm not going to get into details of what works and what doesn't work. But what we know is that essentially there is a very large imbalance between what the rights are of migrant workers versus the powers and authorities of the employer. The reform agendas that we're seeing across the region now, most recently, Saudi Arabia before, huge changes in Qatar, Bahrain has been on it for a while, is a change in mindset. It's one in which they're looking at parts of what forms what is known as the kafala or sponsorship system, specifically looking at the elements related to mobility as well as entry and exit to the country. But that's not all what forms the sponsorship system. But I mean, those are the parts that have been an area of focus for many of the Gulf governments. And they've been looking at how to facilitate these parts to kind of lessen the imbalance that is there in terms of the power relationship between employers and migrant workers. And this in itself is a big shift. A lot of the migration management system that has been set up in the Gulf for such a long time was one where it's based where employers, some employers, not all, because that falls under the prerogative of some employers as well, but the system would allow some employers to have the ability to control the mobility of workers to the extent of keeping the wages very low and keeping mobility very low, which in itself started to form an own business model in which it is very labor intensive, but also very low wage with little obligation to ensure that you put in place the incentives to retain workers. Which is a very important point, because now there is this shift to try to move away from this. I don't think we've moved away in all Gulf countries, but there is a shift towards saying, look, we want to attract more high-skilled workers. We want to give to create jobs that require higher skills, so then we cater more for our nationals. And they've finally starting to make some of the linkages as well, is that reforming areas of the sponsorship system would create that environment that may be more attractive for high-skilled individuals, but would also provide the opportunity to upskill the current labor force that is in the Gulf. Now, this is an important element. I think there are some elements of the sponsorship system that are not being touched upon at all until now, specifically how the residency remains to be tied directly with the employer. The renewal of the residency is tied. The entry itself is tied to an employer. And until you start looking at those and look even beyond the mobility and the reform that happened there, the power imbalance will remain to be there. Of course, many employers, and I'm sure we're going to see examples of foreign employers speaking here today, have at their own initiative and have taken some very positive steps to guarantee workers' rights and so on. They even go beyond what the obligations are from the host country. But also you'll find many employers that haven't. All they have to do is comply with the national legislations and so on that are in place and do not feel the added need to address, to provide additional incentives. And we're not only talking about the sponsorship system, we're also talking about some other tools that remain to be in place that really affect this power imbalance between employer and worker. One is the absconding charge, which is still rampant across the Gulf. I mean, some of them are starting to look at reforming them, decriminalizing them, but it remains to be a major issue, and will need to be addressed to move away again to this more equal terms relationship. But also, it's the absence of basic social protection that is also a major issue that remains to put the migrant workers in a very vulnerable situation in the Gulf. And specifically, this has been highlighted during the time of COVID. I mean, IOM dealt with so many situations of stranded migrants and so on in the region. We've done so many movements. I know governments as well, I mean, have large return programs that have been done. It really showed a lot of the frailties of the system and the available social protection mechanisms that are in place in specific host countries. I'm conscious of the time, so I don't want to drag the discussion, even though I still did not get an alert, but I want to go to 2 minutes, okay. To maybe my final points is the relationship between employer and worker needs to change. It needs to be from one where either you work for me or basically you lose your job, you lose your livelihood, to one in which I need to think how to incentivize you to work for me. I need to think of ways to invest in you to be able to retain you. And the mind shift doesn't need to only happen from governments, but also needs to happen from employers themselves. They benefit when workers' skills are increased. They benefit with productivity, and wages are not going to continue to skyrocket. Yes, of course, wages may go up when the skills increase, when there's more mobility, but they're going to go up to what their market value is. And that is the reality, is across the Gulf, the market value of the different jobs that are there, mainly the low-skilled ones, are not met. And as long as that continues, that means that there is something that is incorrect and dysfunctional in the system that is there. So the mindset change needs to be from governments, but also mindset needs to be changed from employers themselves, in which they continue to see the value of investment in the capacity and the skills and the rights of their workers, and how that would bear with positive rewards. So I'll stop here and I look forward to the rest of our discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mohammed. Some very valid points. You ended with the sort of focus on how the mindset needs to change and how the employer has to see value in retaining workers and incentivize it. So perhaps we need to, and you may perhaps come back around this point on how do we see this happening. Another point that I had in mind was when you referred to the changing policy landscape of the GCC countries, how there is a move and shift towards nationalization. So one of the reasons these blue collar workers are employed from other countries is because there is a need for it. There's no charity aspect there. So how do you see that shift and transition happening if there is this so-called shift to attract more high-skilled workers? Or how do you see that need for low and semi-skilled workers being fulfilled as we go ahead? So those are my 2 points for you to think about. Meanwhile, I'll move on to the next speaker. We have among Mr. Paolo Salvai, who works as Senior Employer Specialist at the Regional Office for Arab States of the International Labour Organization. He joined ILO in 2007 and has worked with different duty stations, including Turin, Lima, Geneva, Yangon, and more recently, Beirut. He has a 15-year experience as a trainer and advisor in governance and management of employers and business membership organizations. So I now invite Paolo to make his interventions. Paolo, 10 minutes, and after 8 minutes, I'll give you a heads up.
Thank you very much, Surabhi, and thank you very much again for the invitation to the ODICM. And it's a pleasure to be among such distinguished speakers. If you don't mind, maybe for my trainer background, I will share a presentation with you. So I'll share my screen and I will talk over the presentation. So just let me know if
we can
you
see
can.
it.
Excellent. So my intervention will be focusing actually a little bit on the business perspectives on factors that are affecting Indian migration to the GCC countries. And I have to say that I'm an economist, too bad for me. And so I will have to start with some numbers, because as an economist, I'm always interested in looking at the data to better understand the dimension of the phenomenon. So in 2019, there were more than 30 million foreign migrants living in the GCC. And the number of migrants is exceptionally high in all the UAE countries, with peak in the United Arab Emirates, 88%, and Qatar, 77%. If we look in absolute terms, Saudi has the highest number of migrant workers with over 13 million migrant workers in 2019. So it is very clear from the table that the GCC countries have somehow grown dependent on the migrant workforce to fuel their economic growth. Let's now have a look at the Indian migrants. So I hope that this number from UNDSA coincides more or less with the numbers of the Minister of the External Affairs in India. But in 2019, there were around 18 million Indian migrants worldwide, and more than 50% are in the GCC. So it is natural, I would say, that the issue of Indian migrants in the GCC is a very important issue for the Indian government. But I want to make another point. Remind from the previous table, 30 million migrants in GCC and over 9 million are Indian. So this means that 1/3 of the migrants in the GCC are from India. So it is natural, in the same way that GCC governments and employers pay due attention to labor migration regulation of Indian workers. And the Indian migrant workers are really vital for the success of the GCC businesses and society at large. Let's now have a look at the distribution per country and disaggregated by gender in this table. So in absolute terms, in 2019, more than 3.5 million Indians were in the UAE and more than 2.5 million in Saudi, you can see from this table. I want also to draw your attention to Oman. And so why Oman, you might say? Because, well, in Oman, half of the migrants are from India, whilst in the other country, Indians represent 1/3 or 1/4 of the migrants in Saudi. So these are countries where, the policies that are going on are of particularly relevant for Indian and for the employers in the GCC. So why so many numbers? And I will promise I will not show others. It is of great interest for the employers in the GCC, given the size, the penetration of the Indian migrants, to analyze 3 phenomena and trends that are shaping the migration landscape, and to understand to what extent they are affecting the possibilities of GCC employers to count with the much needed labor force from India. And they are in this slide. So one is in the very short term, or at least let's hope so, because this crisis is becoming quite longer, much longer than initially foreseen. So the COVID-19 restriction. The second point is related to short, medium, or long term, and there is a big question mark, and I will explain why, related to the nationalization policies. And then in the medium to long term, the automation and digitalizations. So let me go quickly through some of these points. So not much words about the COVID-19 restriction. We all know they are still going on, and in most of the GCC countries, there are somehow no direct flights. There are somehow bans from people from India and actually from many foreigners to come to GCC countries. There are many of the regulations have been extended. Some of them were supposed to expire in 30th of June, and they were extended. This has happened in UAE, in Kuwait, in Oman, and just in Qatar, there is no blanket ban, and there are somehow guidelines for people traveling from India in the last months. We also know that in the last 12 months, according to the aviation ministry, in India, there was a huge repatriation exercise. I mean, really huge. And the numbers that are reported from the aviation ministry in India say that 8.9 million Indians have been repatriated in the last 12 months. There are no published stats on the provenience on Indians benefiting from the Vande Bharat mission. And I take also this occasion maybe to ask whether such statistics on how many Indians were repatriated from GCC are available. I think this is also would be very interesting to understand the dimension of the current migrant Indians actually today in the GCC countries. Let's now have a look at the nationalization policies, which might affect the opportunities of Indians to work in the GCCs. So are these policies provoking a huge substitution effect? Let's have a look at the recent developments. Some worries were generated, at least from the Indian perspective, by the Kuwait law 2020, because there were rumors saying that Kuwait would have accelerated dramatically in their effort to rebalance their labor force and moving from the current 70% migrant and 30% national to the opposite. But actually the law is rather vague and simply states that by November 21, 1 year after the promulgation of the law, the Council of Ministers shall issue a list of data to address the demographic imbalance, including possible quotas for migrant workers. So it is highly unlikely that huge changes will be pushed by this law. And let's remind them the numbers that I presented before. I mean, 73% of the population in Kuwait is migrant. I mean, was migrant in 2019. So there is little demographic space for huge substitution effects in the years to come. Let's go to Oman. So 1.3 million Indians in Oman, representing more than 50% of the migrants in Oman. The Omanization policy is dated in 1988, so quite long story. And this has somehow been intensified over the past months with an increase of work permit fees by significant amount, 50% for all expatriate workers, and some restriction to hire non-nationals in selected sectors. But most probably, I mean, more studies should be done, the potential substitution effect of the latest decrease would be anyhow later. Let's go now to Saudi. So it's an important country, as again, in absolute terms, also a huge Indian community, 2.5 million. So the Ministry of Human Resources and Social Development published further changes to the NITACAT program, the Saudization program that will come into effect as from December 2021. And the changes include a new 3-year Saudization plan with the objective of providing more than 300,000 jobs opportunities for Saudis. And there has been also this year a few new directives of the labor ministries that stipulates that only Saudi will be able to work in malls, so for example. On the employer side, on the business side, the Saudi chambers voiced actually some concern on the excessive speed of the Saudization process due to the lack of adequate skills in the national workforce, the increased cost, and somehow the preference of the national workforce that is not ready to replace migrant workers in many occupations. So we do not have the time to explore developments in all the GCC, but still a couple of works on the UAE, which counts with, which counted in 2019 with 3.5 billion Indians. there are no big developments, to be honest. And let's recall the data once again. 88% of the population was migrant in 2019. There is simply no space for big replacements of migrants with nationals. Some further reflection around nationalization policy. Are they a real threat to Indian migrations? There are a number of studies, and I would like to cite one of the conference board. It's called Job Nationalization Policy, Trade-off between Productivity and Employment, which are particularly interesting for the business communities. These studies explore whether job nationalization policies and the consequent creation of jobs for nationals have led to a reduction in productivity. Well, there are quantitative evidence on the trade-off between creating more job opportunities for natives and productivity. The trade-off has been the highest in the GCC compared to the global average. And there are empirical evidence of migrants having a productivity premium over nationals. And on top of it, migrants have substantially lower wages, and this makes much more attractive for the private enterprises. So unless efforts are made to improve the productivity of nationals, there will be limited substitution possibilities between migrants and nationals in many jobs. Another element is the enrollment of national in TVET system, which still is very low in all the GCC countries. There is somehow still some kind of social stigma. And if you see the number, enrollment in vocational programs at secondary upper level is as low as 2% in Oman, Saudi, and Qatar, and 2.5% in UAE, and 4% in Kuwait. So this is against another element, against the strong substitution effect. Let me now move to the automation digitalization. Okay, there is general agreement that the technological forces for automation and big data will change the nature of work fundamentally in the coming decades. But there is much less agreement about the pace and the extent of the change. In GCC, so far, most of the automation has happened in government, through the government, finance, and retail, obviously through the COVID with a boom of e-commerce. But there are also factors slowing down the adoption of technologies, which might have negative effects on the volume of needed low and mid-skilled migrant workers. One of these factors is the share of wages. Because, while the share of wages in the GDP typically reaches 60%, in the UAE, we have only data for the UAE, the compensation of employees amount to only 32% of non-government and non-oil GDP. And this is due also to the migrant cheap labor. This means that on average, labor cost is much less of a concern for business or producer than in other markets. Another factor to be considered is social preferences of GCC residents regarding technology adoption, especially when it comes to the choice between in-person versus automated services. A strong preference still exists towards in-person services. On the contrary, there are two factors that might accelerate: the nationalization policies that might lead to an increase in the wage share and so maybe incentivize automation. And secondly, as was mentioned by my colleague, there are diversification policies into high growth sector. And I will just close with one final remark, and sorry for extending myself. What employers from the region expect? Obviously, they expect workers to be equipped with the needed skill set. And typically, employers complain about, the skill gaps of the workforce, migrant and national workforce. What do we know so far about the skills for the future in GCC? We know little. I mean, there is no doubt that there will be demand for skills related to new technologies built on STEM and ICT fields. But also soft skills are becoming much more in demand, and they are very much more difficult to define. What could be done, in my opinion? In the very short term, skills anticipation studies are particularly relevant in the very short term, because COVID-19 crisis have partially redefined the expected skill set of migrant workers in a number of sectors, and it is important to understand, and in the interest of the employer to understand, to share information regarding their recruitment plan and needs. And this will help country of origin to keep the future migrant workers within the skill set to be recruited productively and productively employed in the GCC. It might take some time to rebuild the presence of the foreign community to the level prior to the COVID-19 crisis, but there are no big reasons for believing that the number will strongly diminish. And as ILO, we are currently supporting skills need anticipation studies in a few GCC countries. And as soon as data will be available, I will be happy to share with all of you. In the longer term, 4 elements that are particularly important for the employers: skills mapping in origin and destination country, adoption of skills development and skills recognition system at national level and across migration corridors, especially through skills partnership, more dialogue between educational institutions and employers at the national level, and improved data sharing to avoid skills mismatches. Each of these themes might merit further research and maybe question, but I'm afraid that this will be for next time. Thank you very much, and I say stand ready to reply to any question.
Thank you, Paolo. That was really informative. And as against normal belief, we found your session very enlightening in the sense that you went over each of the 6 GCC countries in terms of their policies and where we are currently. And to actually know that the substitution effect on foreign workers will be actually lower than what is being anticipated right now. You mentioned one very important point that along with the policy, there would also need for an enhancement of the productivity of the local labor force, which will play a crucial role in the replacement eventually if that was to happen. So perhaps you could elaborate a little more on that. And I also wanted to hear your thoughts, since you mentioned about skill anticipation and mapping studies. How far do you see the role that skill partnerships could play in sort of bridging the gap that we hear of employers saying that they do not get the needed skill set from workers? So perhaps those are my 2 points for your consideration. I'll now move to the next speaker, who perfectly fits the sequence. He's from UAE, Mr. Simon Menzies. He's Senior Manager Employee Welfare and Relations from Transguard Group, which is one of the big employers which recruits from India. Mr. Menzies is an experienced operation manager with a demonstrated history of working in the outsourcing offshoring industry. He's skilled in the field of negotiations, sales, strategic planning, business development, and sales management. So, Mr. Simon, over to you. You'll have 10 minutes, please. Are you there? Mr. Simon, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, please
Thank
go
you,
ahead.
thank you, Surami, and thank you, Paulo, for your wonderful views. And I hear you about the market conditions, and this is a valuable session for migrated employees. I will purely speak on the experiences that we face, as an employer, because I'm an employee of one of the largest employer in this region, and having been managing labor, the unskilled and skilled employees for a long time. Where we are going wrong, what we are doing wrong, and where we need to improve as a country, as a citizen of India, and what we need to do. The first thing is, prior COVID, if you consider prior COVID, we had a lot of employees based in UAE, and especially in our country, in our company, more than 80% of our employees, we are talking about 70,000 employees, 50,000 are from India. 50,000 are from India. And we always ask one question: why so many people from India are coming here for employment? And what we are going wrong? The employees are coming because we are looking for skilled employees and unskilled employees. And majority of the time, when we think about skilled employees for the labor class and all those things, the input they get back home during their recruitment is wrong. When you are talking about, I completely agree with Paula and Mr. Mohammed, wherein they say that the people who come here and we conclude them as an unskilled employee. The reason being is the unskilled qualified employees are coming here as a skilled employee. And that is the major point. When they come over here, they try to work in the environment that they never expected of, because when you are a qualified person, when you are recruited as a skilled employee like mason, carpenter, or a skill fixer, the problem here happens is you expect something good to happen in a very quick time, because your expectations are different when you're coming from India here. And this will lead to the depression and all those things, and the employee started looking for other options, and employer getting frustrated, and all those things starts from there, where employees are trying to run away from the company, looking for better options. That is where the absconders case increase, and all those things are happening. So first point of contact is that when they are recruiting in India, the complete and correct picture needs to be given to the employees, the candidates who are coming over here. And the policies that we are talking about today in here, majority of the companies, as we are talking about in a Transcard or any other companies, the policies, we say that lower pay employees. The wages are not wages the employees always know when they come over here. We mentioned their salaries before their recruitment back home in India. The lower wage is not a problem. When we pay, that is very important when you're talking about this Indian migrant. When you are paying on time, the wages are not a problem. The skill level is a problem. So in companies like us, what they are doing at the moment is we recruit people. We know that they are skilled employees, they recruit as skilled employees, but we check their skills. We have our in-house skill development center. As soon as they come over here, we will send them to the skill development center. We check their skills, always check their skills, and we inform them that your skill level is like this. You need to improve. We send them for the training for the first 15 days. They go through the training, they get themselves skilled so that they are prepared for the market requirement. That is where we have been very successful over the last 15 to 20 years, where large volume of people are coming from our region, and we are managing to deploy so many people in the various markets here. We are having around 100 countries employees are there working over here in Transcar, and this is one of the reasons we have been very successful over the years. And at the moment, we're struggling. We're struggling because Indian market, Indian people are not coming over here due to the flight cancellation. And there are a lot of opportunities that here for our people, our skilled people. So first thing, when we're talking about this, we need to make sure that this flight cancellation need to be sorted out as soon as possible, so that this market can take people, as many people as possible. The second and very important thing over here is when you are talking about companies like us, when you are recruiting people to the companies like us, we are having a wide range of businesses within our company. We are not only talking about the construction, we are talking about the security, we are talking about the facility management, and every field of this has a lot of scope in the current market. When when you are selecting a construction employee, employee coming here in the construction with the hope of moving into facility management, and that is where the companies are very important to upskill the employee for the next position. And this is what, as a company, we are doing here in Transcard, that even though the person must come as in a skilled role, there are opportunities. We are creating opportunities for the people so that upskill themselves into the market requirement. Maybe we put them into English classes. We put them into security training classes. We put them into the cleaning training. Then all those sort of trainings are very important as an employer to give the employees, to retain the employees in the company. So we are having so much employees spending a lot of time in Transguard is because of this reason, wherein we plan our employees, we don't keep them in a particular position. We make them to grow in Transguard so that they can get into various levels in Transguard so that they will be happy. But there are exceptions, people who come here and people who think that they need to be, promoted immediately, and sometimes we come across people who are getting depressed, which we have seen in the current scenario, where the migrated employees, those who are gone to India, they're stuck in India, and those who are here, they're stuck here because they cannot go back to India due to the current condition. And this is the third skill level, what we have implemented recently, counseling to the employees, wherein we counsel our employees to take care of the current situation, because People haven't seen their families for a long time. People haven't gone and seen their families for a long time. So to manage their expectations, manage their mental stability, manage their feeling, they want to meet their families. It is a very tough task for the companies like us at the moment, wherein the employees, the lower level employees always think that, they miss their families, they've been out of their families. So all those things we inculcate in the companies like us. So I feel upskilling level is very important. As soon as you come around here, train the employees. Once they are trained employees, the next level promotion is very, very important for the employer to do. And once the promotion is done, and we have to manage their expectations, their the well-being, all those the basic needs that the employee needs, so that we can give a good result for an employee and their families. And this is what we are doing as an employer of a large volume of people that we have been having over here. Currently, if you are seeing in the system, we are having around 35,000 Indians. Proud to say that Indians are dominating
2 minutes.
dominating companies like France. And this is a good initiative wherein we need to change some of the policies wherein we have seen people exploiting the uh, the candidates who come over here, and those people who are exploiting them are the people from our own region, our own countries. So we have to make sure that some stringent policies to be made through this forum. We need to speak to the people, we need to speak to the concerned people, so that those policies will help these migrant employees so that they can grow in the field, they can live a recent life. They can live, because the expectation when they leave from India, to meet that expectation, we as employers have to do something to live up to their expectation, to make their expectation fulfilled. And this is what I feel as an employee, as an employer, and as a manager of employee welfare. Thank you, Surabhi.
Thank you so much, Simon. You provided the employer's perspective in this discussion. While you said that, you try and fulfill all the conditions as laid out in the employment contract, low wages is not a problem. But often when we do all these trainings, we do hear people, I'm not saying specifically regarding TransGuard, but in general, we hear of foreign employers keeping passports, confiscation of identity documents. So those are some of the complaints that we do hear. While you say that complete and correct pictures needed to be given to the workers. So in that, I would want you to maybe elaborate later when we take questions. How effectively do you communicate with the RAs when you get workers on board to keep in mind this issue? So maybe we can take this up later. I'll now move on to Mr. Vinay Kumar, our colleague from the OE and PG division, who has been associated with the eMigrate project right from the inception. And he is the person in charge of the digitization of immigration-related services under the eMigrate project. So Vinayji, over to you. 10 minutes, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Surabhi. Good afternoon, everyone. So as we all are aware that presently we have a system known as eMigrate system, which is developed by the Ministry of External Affairs. And prior to the system, there could be a very flexible system between employer and the recruiting agent. So they could do the way they could do the recruitment the way they want. After the incarnation of eMigrate system, there could be some changes in the procedure they have been following. So we have this difficult role to manage the expectation of employer and the recruiting agent as well. And while the system is primarily designed
in such a way that immigrant or the potential immigrants, they should be getting more and more information possible. So we are trying our level best to reach to the actual immigrant, as Mr. Simon from TransGuard is saying, the actual picture is not given to the employee, so what they should expect. So we are trying to bridge this gap, but definitely there is a cooperation element involved from the employer as well as the recruiting agent to provide that clear picture to the immigrants. So in the beginning we will have a short presentation, and so I'm sure everyone in this room is aware about the system, how it works, what kind of features it has, and the system started since 2014, and the foreign employer registration module came in operation in June 2015. So since June 2015, we have very large number of employers who have got registered in the system, and we are very keen to know from them whether which part they are liking, what kind of difficulties they are facing, which part they want to be modified, or which part they really do not like at all. So we have a very brief presentation, and if question answer are there, we will definitely take in the end of the this discussion. Yeah. So it is a very comprehensive system developed to facilitate the smooth recruitment and immigration of Indian workers going abroad. And it has many features like the registration of recruiting agent. So the recruiting agent who requires the registration certificate from Protector General of Immigrant, they are all registered in the system. And the feature, as we were talking, we have introduced in June 2015, exactly 6 years ago. So the employers can also get registered. And through this way, we were able to introduce some kind of transparency as well as the participation from employer. We were able to increase to some extent. And the ECR country foreign employer registration started in the June 2015, as I was saying, and recently in the month of June we have also started the provision for the employers who are located in the ECNR countries. So lately we are receiving interest from various countries or their government directly that they need the skilled manpower. And we will also see during the presentation how India can meet that skilled manpower requirement to ECR countries. Definitely UAE, Saudi Arabia, and other GCC countries are the primary recruiters. But definitely there is a need which are coming from other places as well. So after the registration of employer, he will be given a user ID and password. And with the help of this user ID and password, he can log on into the system and he can place an online demand to the desired recruiting agent. So we have seen a very good uses of this provision, particularly of raised demand. And we have a very large number of demands raised by the employer with the recruiting agents. So this is one of the things which I am sure is enjoyed by the employer or liked by the employer. And then there is a whole cycle of immigration. So like immigrant is required to be identified, his details are to be provided by the respective recruiting agent. Employer can update the visa details which employer is actually receiving in his country. And there are country wise we have the employment contract. So these are the contract which are usually provided by the Indian missions, and in some cases these contracts are also accepted by the foreign government. So the employer, for the purpose of standardization, the employment contract template is available for each of the country, and employer can generate it in the system. And there is a requirement for signing of this contract by employer immigrant as well as a recruiting agent if the recruitment is through the recruiting agent. And there is a term we always hear like dual contract. So many people say the employment contract which is uploaded on eMigrate is actually replaced by the employer when the immigrant is in is in is in the country of employment. But as far as what I understand, I do not find it as a problem because it is a legal requirement in the destination country to have that contract. So we are fine with it. With the employment contract which is uploaded on eMigrate, we ensure that the basic terms and condition, including a salary and other facilities like leaves and other benefits, are covered in the in the employment contract, which is recognized by both as well as RA and employer. And recruiting agent being a signatory on it, he has to find way with the employer that whatever contract he is signing in the destination country, all those terms and conditions are included. Yeah. So other features we also know that like there is a requirement for immigration clearance of ECR passport holders who are going to ECR countries. So all GCC countries are ECR countries as we are aware of it. So a very less percentage of ECR passport holders are actually there. So approximately the total number of immigrants who are going to the ECR countries, so only 15% are ECR passport holder. So the system does not create any trouble for in the free movement of the immigrant. So they can definitely go directly without coming on the system. So if someone says that because of eMigrate the immigration could have been reduced or decreased, so the eMigrate is only covering around 15 or less than 20% of immigrants. So it is not coming in a way of any kind of immigration in terms of numbers. Other facilities which definitely help employers as well, like the passport details of immigrant are verified with the passport database of Ministry of External Affairs. So the passports details are maintained by another department of ME itself, and the provision for online payment of fees, which is very common for all systems. And there is another feature for purchase of online insurance policy. So as ECR passport holders are mandatorily to seek EC, the ECNR passport holders, they may not be seeking EC, but we have provided them a self-registration provision so they can or their employer can also register them and purchase this policy online. So
Vinayji, 2 minutes.
yeah. So this should help the employer as well to cover certain kind of risk. The policy is very low cost and it has very wide coverage. And the eMigrate data is also provided to the immigration authorities of India. So we are able to keep track the travel details of the immigrant when he has departed from India, when he has arrived back, or like that. And definitely there is an integral option to grievance processing. So I may need 1 or 2 minutes extra because I have some interesting data to show. So
Maybe you can go to the data part, Vinayji.
yeah. So we are directly going to data part, and so right now we have around 1500 Indian recruiting agents who are registered in the system. So employer has a direct access to 1500 recruiting agent. So we know that in ECR countries like UAE or Saudi, the employment system is very mature. But to other countries where employer are not much in touch with the Indian recruiting agent, they can choose any of recruiting agent directly online, and then later on they can contact them. So in the last 4 years, there is a 50% increase in the number of recruiting agents. So it is a very good kind of jump we have seen in the last 4 years. Next. And as we are seeing that the top 6 GCC countries, we can see the number of employers registered in last 6 years. For UAE 48,000 plus, Saudi Arabia 49,000, then Qatar 16,000, Oman approximately 3,000, then Kuwait 75,000, Bahrain 6,000. So approximately around 2 lakh employers are registered in the system. It also shows that the system is smooth and people are able to register. Job data. So we have one more slide. We have Excel sheet actually. So we will just take 1 minute in that. We also have a job category wise data. So we have taken the year 2019, and as you can see on your screen, the most favored category, it is just coming up. So for UAE, you can see that so the requirement of Mason is very high, and obviously employers can correct if they see any difference in the data. So this is ECR country data, sorry, ECR passport holder data, and as I was saying, there could be around 6 times ECNR passport holders going. So Mason for UAE, then worker category, carpenter, cleaner, fitter, as Mr. Simon from TransGuard is saying, the skilling is done for the Indian immigrant. So we definitely believe these many people are going to these countries, getting skilled, getting trained, getting experience, and creating a very large skilled pool in the India. So so these person can not only go to ECR country after they are suitably experienced, they can go to any other country. So probably with the database in next 4 to 5 years, we will be in a position to provide a database which is very enriched to all the countries, and employer and recruiting agent can benefit from this data. So the Saudi Arabia, we can see general labor is much in demand. Driver is in much demand. Domestic driver much in demand. Some recruiting agents may also be knowing the fact about this driver. So some people may be recruited as a driver, but they may not be doing exactly the job of the driver. So that may be a certain kind of percentage. So all country data we have, and with the data.
Vinayji, I'll have to ask you to stop there.
Last sentence. So with the help of this data, we feel that employers and recruiting agent definitely will benefit. Thank you, and sorry for taking a bit longer.
Sorry, I had to interrupt. We have one more speaker lined up, and we certainly want to listen to him because he's the other end of the cycle, being the recruiter, representing the recruitment fraternity in India. So our last speaker for the day is Mr. V.S. Abdul Karim. He has served as president of both FORI, which is the Federation of Recruitment Associations of India, and president of IPEPSIL, Indian Personal Export Promotion Council. And he's the chairman and MD of Creative Group of Travel and Tourism. Mr. Abdul Karim, you have 10 minutes, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Surabhi. Thank you, ICM, for inviting me to participate in this web meet. Actually, our subject matter is the role of FEs in the recruitment cycle, especially in the emerging scenario of post-COVID. Because we know there are role of all stakeholders. Now we are in a COVID pandemic environment where there is uncertainty remains again for a couple of years. So we are emerging into a new normal kind of an environment. So where there would be some redefined kind of a role of FEs in the host countries. There will be the accommodation, etc. There also has to be restructured as per the COVID norms for the time being, which will be expensive for the FEs. As such, there are several issues like insurance adequately redefined as per the pandemic norms. There are a lot of things to take care for the safety and security of the immigrant in overseas placement in the emerging scenario where there is a pandemic continues. That is our main subject matter, topic of discussion, I believe. Because we know there are regulatory norms in the exporting country, where in India, we are an HR exporting country. And all these GCCs are HR importing, hosting country. The FE, the host, has to be a responsible host in every time, not only in a COVID environment. We have a bilateral agreements with all these GCC countries, wherein the strategies are defined. It has to be a responsible hosting according to the regulatory norms, compliances, etc. We have an immigrant portal in place, a very strong digital platform. Similarly, all the hosting countries also have regular reforms for receiving, hosting expatriate HR population, and localization, as we all know, all these progress happening. In spite of that aggressive reforms and localization process of the major GCC countries, still 75% of the placement, they prefer non-nationalities. There are reasons for that. So in this emerging scenario, in a post-COVID environment, again, we have to take care of the safety and security of the people, specifically with the pandemic spread. What are the role of FEs is the main subject. And among the GCC, Saudi Arabia hosts the dominance of Indians is the highest in Saudi Arabia, then second in UAE, then Kuwait, and Qatar, Bahrain, Oman, etc. Some of the deficiencies still to be rectified with the bilateral agreements, strategies to make, which is very important. For example, in Saudi Arabia, there are mega recruitment companies, which is they can get 10,000, 15,000, any number of visas. So that is the major recruitment flow takes place nowadays to Saudi Arabia through a mega recruitment companies. Whereas these mega recruitment companies subcontract these HR to other FEs locally there. In case of any project problems or financial problems comes to that contractor, that contractor is not paying to the salary or money to the mega recruitment company. So the mega recruitment company has to pay the salary in time. They are not paying the salaries in time. Then dispute happens. There are all the POE officers, PG officers are experiencing this very often nowadays. Whereas the mega recruitment company is the legally responsible to honor the contractual obligations signed between the RA and in the immigrant, as per the documents uploaded in the immigrant. But these violations happens very often. There are several complaints pending in PO officers and PG officers related to this. How to
2
rectify
minutes, Mr. Abdul Karim.
how to rectify this is very important. So these bilateral agreements has to review and redefined in cooperation with the respective GCC countries, and to rectify this kind of a difficulty for the peoples placed over there to be redefined, and the host country government to support for that is one of the important thing to review. And generally, it has to be adequately supported with all ILO norms that is more recommendable to avoid exploitation. And nowadays, you can see visiting visas converting into employment after reaching these people there on visit visa. Now, as per their reforms, there is no need of exit. They can convert from then and there itself. How this can be accountable in an Immigrate portal? The objective of the portal, Immigrate, is not taking place in that kind of a process. So Immigrate also has to be featured accordingly. And the FE there, who is converting them to employment and giving them an employment there, has to approach Indian embassy of the respective country and Immigrate has to have a feature to register them. Then the accountability will be there. And that candidate also will be safe and secured as per our regulatory norms. This is very important aspect. Mr. Vinay will be hearing this. I know Mr. Vinay from the inception. I used to sit occasionally with him for all kind of changes. So similarly, in Saudi Arabia, there are category changes and these kafalat changes take place. Whenever these kafalat changes take place, this has to be the FE, and the candidate has to approach the nearest Indian mission, and the Immigrate platform has to have that features to register them, to have a proper accountability. This kind of reforms is rectification is very important to avoid any kind of a difficulty and hardship to the immigrant community. It is very important. And dispute settlements and other things, the accident and death case happens. Some of the employees are coming here on vacation and happens to die here sometime, and their compensation to avail take long time because this all has to be rectified. It's an easy process, and portal remains there to bring back is also very important. The procedures are simple, but exploitation is not taking place. So these are all the responsibility and role of the foreign employers over there to have a rectification process through their government channel, and to rectify all these things, to have a smooth and handling of the expatriate population, and to maintain the reputation. Rest of the things after conclusion session, I would like to hear. Thank you.
Those were some very valid points. Unfortunately, we are restricted by time, but you made one very important point regarding subletting being done by FEs, where the contract is with a mega FE, and then when actually in operation, it's done by some other recruiter. So we have amongst us a number of FEs from Saudi Arabia, from Oman, from Kuwait, from UAE. So we will hear their take on the points that you raised. So when we go, I'll now open the floor for question and answers. I'll request your support to be very brief in your intervention so that we can give the floor back to the panel for their remarks, one last comment on the various interventions from the floor. At the outset, I would like to invite Mazen, who is the Chief of Mission from IOM Kuwait, to very briefly tell us about the situation in Kuwait, and then we'll hear from all the FEs who are part of the panel and part of the audience today. Mazen, can you come in?
Thank you so much for the kind invitation. I do believe that many of the points have been already covered by colleagues, especially by Muhammad, who covered the GCC countries, and as well as others. But one point that was mentioned by the colleague from ILO, we need to highlight that there are so many news that sometimes they are not true. Like there are so many of the rumors talking about the Kuwaitization, that we will be shifting from 30-70 to 70-30% between the national and between the migrants in the country. But these are still the news and the paper. And unless we have a clear assessment on the needs in the country, I think this will remain something that is not 100% sure. So we need to be very careful when we are referring to things that they are not 100% approved by the government. I will not take a lot of time because I do believe that many other colleagues will be in input, especially the foreigner employers. But I do have my colleague who's responsible for labor migration in Kuwait. So in case she wants to add few points based on her discussion with the government, I will invite her for the floor. Over to you, my colleague.
Thank you,
Hello, hi.
Yes, who is here?
Hello.
Yes.
Thank you very much for inviting me. This is Yusra Al-Ajlan. I'm the IOM Hub Focal Point in the IOM in Kuwait. So very briefly, I'll just discuss what Kuwait is working on or has worked on and what they're planning to work on as well in the future. A lot of the topics that they're working on, some of our colleagues here brushed upon them. So due to the imbalance in Kuwait's demographics, Kuwait is also heading towards Kuwaitization, just like the other GCC countries. However, through the government's work with the IOM, Kuwait is focused on simultaneously implementing ethical recruitment and Kuwaitization at the same time. So we at the IOM just concluded the Strength Project, the pilot phase, and the outcomes were that Kuwait has trained and licensed recruitment agencies in the country and is on the way to mandate IRIS ethical recruitment training to all RAs, recruitment agencies in Kuwait. So that's what the government is aiming for. They have a very they have an outlook on basically implementing ethical recruitment to all recruitment agencies to make sure all migrant workers are recruited ethically. So we're currently implementing the IRIS Ethical Recruitment Hospitality Project as well, which targets the private sector and in specific hotel chains. This project is also engaged with the civil societies in Kuwait. Civil societies in Kuwait are pretty active and the government do recognize them. Civil societies we're trying to enable them and empower them in providing grievance mechanisms to migrant workers in the private sector. In the future, Kuwait is working on a phase 2 of Strength. Hopefully some of our plans that I can just highlight are implementing ethical recruitment to the private sector specifically. So we have an outreach strategy that we're working on to try and implement it to the private sector and promote it in the private sector, since most of migrants are employed in Kuwait's private sector. The IOM, after the IOM mainstreams ethical recruitment in the country, we're aiming to also provide CREST training, which is targeted to employers, which also promotes ethical recruitment. However, it's very similar to IRIS training. It's under IRIS training, but specifically for private sector. So also Kuwait is trying to strengthen the labor migration information system. One of our colleagues here was also discussing how India has that same system, and we're also trying to do it to increase transparency between employers, the Public Authority of Manpower, and the employee. Also, by implementing the Skill Mobility Partnership, we're trying to benefit the migrant worker to gain the skills that are in demand in the country of destination, which is Kuwait, to try and decrease the employee turnover in the companies. And this is also through investing in migrant workers that come into the country. We're also trying to optimize the recruitment process to increase transparency and prevent exploitation from taking place, and training labor inspectors in having a regulatory framework when going in and checking the policies. We're trying to have a concrete regulatory framework that they can follow. So those are some of the things. I don't want to take up more of your time. Those are some of the things that Kuwait is working on, and I think it's very compatible to what is being worked on in the country of origin. And hopefully we can also work together in the future. We also have recruitment agencies here in Kuwait in the call with us. So
Okay.
yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Those were some very valid points. We've made a note. And now we'll invite the recruiters amongst us. We have Mawarid Recruitment Company. We have somebody from Oman. May I request the FEs present here today to sort of give their views in about a minute. Somebody from Gulfar Engineering and Contracting from Oman is here. Tamkeen Human Resource Company, Saudi Arabia. If in that order, you could just share your views in about a minute. Is anybody there from Mawarid?
Hi, this is Muhammad Adil from Tamkeen Human Resource from Saudi Arabia. Good afternoon
Yes.
to everyone.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, actually, the purpose of today's meeting, as we all understand, is especially for the immigrants on the low wages. That's the main issue. So because sometimes which I got the point that there's a complaint on the low wages, and I understand Mr. Simon also from Transgulf explained that whenever we recruit from any of the country, either from India or from any other country, but especially from India, we inform all the recruitment agencies, and whenever we upload our request to the e-migrate system, we also have given the full details of all the requirements. Either it's a labor category or it's skilled category or highly professional executive level, whatever the categories. So all the details been explained from the employer side, like from the foreign agencies, and it's up to the recruitment agencies who has to communicate with the worker, to the immigrant inside India before he leaves. So it will also effective to that like it can the complaints can be resolved in start. Instead, the immigrant came here and then he start complaining, because one of the reasons the workers who are coming from the India, like they are not coming from the direct one agency. There are subcontractors who are involved in all these process. So there's a miscommunication also, because the subcontractor cannot give the complete details to the workers, and he just keep him in the dark side, and he just tell, oh, you can go and you can find a good job and this will be salary. And when he come up here, and it's totally different. But on our side, when we are like I'm with in a recruitment department as a coordinator working in Tamkeen, and we are hiring all the workers and we explain all the details. And also we're doing just before that pandemic of COVID, we are doing the in-person interviews also and online interviews also with our clients also. So to clarify all the things to the worker before he arrives, before he accepts the job offer, either it's in the labor market, in the hospital, or in the nursing department, medical department, whatever. So we explain all these things to the worker. It's up to the recruitment agencies also to play their part to clarify all the things to the worker before they arrive here. So if there's a question from our side that sometimes we are offering the low wages or whatever, so I think we are not offering the low wages, because these are wages are already approved by the e-migrate system. Because we cannot raise the demand with the low wage which is not accepted by the e-migrate system. So it's from the recruitment agency side who are not sometimes clarifying to the workers, or if they get the worker agree on the low wages, so it's not the part from the foreign agencies. They cannot be blamable. But from our side, we are doing our best to provide. We are hiring a lot of numbers from India. Even that pandemic, situation. We are keep our interviews going on. So soon we have the flights. We can have the workers here also. We are have providing them like the best as we can, the accommodation. We facilitate them with all the IDs, with their ATM before they leave to the work. So we providing them all these facilities. We have our own system in the company where we have all the data and it's available at any time to the Indian embassy, to the immigrants, anyone who want to visit, who want to check the data of the candidates, it's available.
All right. Thank you, Mohammad Adil ji. We'll now move to Kuwait. Mubin Yaqub is here, who's the HR and marketing manager. Mubin, you want to come in and say a few words? Are you there? Do any of the RAs would want to come in to the point which was being made by Mr. Adil? Any of the RAs? I know Suresh Kumarji wrote a number of interventions in the chat box, which I'm sure is visible to all. But does anyone want to take the floor and say something here?
Yes, Surabhi, this is Dr. Suresh Kumar.
Yes, Suresh Kumarji. Very briefly, please summarize whatever you have said.
Yeah, I just want to add you a few points in this thing. Basically, the problem which the immigrants are facing from the FEs are mainly on the salary, what the salary has been committed here and what they are getting, and sometimes the overtime, their accommodation has many issues, then quality of the food, medical facilities, insurance, and the other these are the concerns of the immigrants. This has to be sorted out, and plus mainly the three types of recruitments are happening. Actually, means basically all the multinational companies are doing a free recruitment where they bear all the expenses for the recruitment, including the professional fees of the recruitment agencies. And there is a partly paid recruitment where they provide only the joining ticket and the recruitment agency has to collect the service charges from the immigrants. And the third one, that is the walkover, because they don't pay anything and they don't even provide the joining ticket also. And problem is that these illegal recruitments are happening, lot of things, and these illegal recruitment agents are providing money to these foreign employees for getting these visas. This is the baddest thing is happening, and this is against the ethics of the recruitment. This has to be curtailed, and that's the reason I always telling that actually we need to defend the role of FE, RAs, and immigrants. The FE role has to be defined properly, and once the candidate sign the employment contract, which has been vetted with and approved by the ministry, the onus of well-being and the security in a foreign land is transferred to the government. If the FE default and the MEA approved contract that has signed with the worker or exploit him in violation of the local laws, then it is the responsibility of the Indian mission abroad to intervene and tackle the situation. This is what is being done by the missions of Philippines, etc., in the Gulf region. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Suresh Kumar. Those were some interesting points. Are there any other questions from the floor before I give the floor back to the panel for their interventions?
Hi, this is Jyoti. I'm from a company called Naya Jobs. I just want to bring this to the panelists. There are new digital platforms that are going to be disrupting the entire ecosystem of hiring. They would be like companies like Apna, which are now the blue collar of LinkedIn, where employers could directly contact multiple candidates through this particular platform. Supposedly, we do an entire hiring through a platform where there would be no FE in the picture or none of the other, the recruitment channels that have been followed and are now being practiced in a very robust way. Would there be any kind of a system that would come where there would be governance and statutory compliances for them as well, where they could not bypass these regulatory frameworks, which are now being, applied so strictly to all of us? What would then be the system that could be followed in the future? We have to really think about it, because digital is the way forward, and we need to really look at it now, because post-COVID is going to happen very soon. And then what? That time we will not have to actually reinvent the curve, which is already happening now. Thank you.
Thank you, Jyoti. That was a very interesting point. Any more questions from the floor? If there are no more questions from the floor, then I'll just give the floor back to the panel to sort of respond to the various questions in the chat box and what they've heard from the other panelists and from the floor. So 2 minutes each to each of the panelists. I'll start with Mohammed. Mohammed, are you there?
Ma'am, he just had to leave right now because he was in another engagement.
Okay, then I'll move on to Paulo. Paulo, you have any sort of response to the interventions from the floor and the questions? I think there's one addressed to you specifically.
First of all, thank you very much. Very interesting discussions and questions from the floor. I mean, 2 points. One is related to your questions on skills anticipation. What we are doing is to connect with the Chamber of Commerce and Industry in selected GCC countries to really understand the skill sets needs by the employers in those countries in the near futures. So I think this is an interesting exercise that has been done by the ILO in other countries, in other parts of the world, and we are trying to replicate the same methodology in possibly 3 countries right now, which are Oman, Kuwait, and Bahrain. So as soon as we have obviously result, I'm happy to share with you, and I think this data sharing would be extremely useful for all the stakeholders involved in these matters. Regarding the platform, I want really to be brief. It's a very complex, I think, discussion, and digital platform in every field have created unprecedented opportunity for workers, business, and society. But at the same time, they pose serious threats to decent work and fair competition. So what I can just recommend, and I will share maybe if you allow me to do so to the chat box, a very comprehensive report that was published this year by the ILO on this matter, including the part on recruitment that has been, a major piece of research of the ILO, collecting stories, information, data over the last 6 years. I think this might be interesting, and maybe trying some of the answers might be found over there. Over to you, and thanks again for the invitation.
Thank you, Paulo. I'll now move to Simon. Simon, your thoughts in about 2 minutes on the various queries and questions raised about FEs and the recruitment practices.
Thank you, Surabhi. I've heard everyone speaking about it. It's not always recruitment is wrong. We have to think that it's they are doing their level best to get the demand to the various companies that is required in UAE market. It's sometimes, yes, I do understand there are the sub agents, they are involved, but majority of the time we have to understand that people know where they are going, what they are doing, where the communication has to be extremely clear right in the first day and after coming here. I feel we say that we don't meet the employee expectation is only because of the conversion rate they do, and once they come over here, the expenditure is little higher than what is expected. So I feel when we do a clear communication in the beginning stage, during the recruitment, before their departure, and after coming here, after the departure, after they reach here, definitely will help this process. And it is a good initiative because everyone needs to involve. This is for better results. Just want to say that we have to reach to a stage wherein we control our these processes compared to other countries. There are some stringent policies are there. If our government, through this forum, if we can make a stricter policies, definitely we can lead, we can lead up to, we can change our image as a country, because we are a good country, qualified country, and people from India are extremely qualified, the skilled one. For the qualified people, let them come as a qualified role, not as a skilled employee. This will be mitigated if we come to a proper policies. And this is a good initiative. And if whatever help is needed, from our side, we are always there to help you out. Thank you very much for inviting me and calling me for this wonderful event. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Now, Vinayji, do you have any points to make? Vinayji, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear.
Do you have any interventions to make?
Yeah, I have few points. So someone
Yes.
asked, Jyoti asked actually, so what kind of digital platform can enhance the employer's activity? So as I was mentioning that when we moved from a physical system to the e-migrate system, obviously there are some technical challenges, and obviously there are some process related challenges and a practice related challenges also. So definitely there were some difficulties in the beginning, but later on, as we can see in the numbers, our system is working smoothly. Indian missions are able to interact through the system with the employer, and they, their applications are getting processed. So I think there could be challenge whenever we move from one system to another system, whether it is a physical system to digital system, or even from one digital system to another digital system. And one person, Mr. Rafiq, has said that e-migrate is unique, and we should prepare it for facing all challenges and getting better protection for all workers. So as ministry is trying to collaborate with most of the countries, primarily in GCC and also outside GCC. So we are collaborating information like related to salary, actual employer name, working conditions, working hours. So definitely there could be some integrations also, like Saudi Arabia or UAE system may be integrated with e-migrate system. So it will become further hassle free. No more manual application to be applied on e-migrate. So definitely we are moving to many directions, and we can definitely see some positive results in next 1 year. Thanks.
And now we'll move on to our last panelist, Mr. Abdul Karim.
Yeah.
Karimji, you have points to make? So please go ahead.
Yeah, I have few suggestions to minimum rectify some important points. One thing is to legalize the visiting visa, my immigrants to converting into employment. The e-migrate system has to be adequately featured and rectified. Similarly, the kafalat change, the sponsorship change, also has to be rectified, featured accordingly, so that immigrants will be legalized and protected. One thing. Another thing, to avoid exploitation, the MOU signed between India and these GCC countries has to be adequately rectified as per the regulatory conditions of our country, which is there in the e-migrate system, and it has to be aligned with the host country's labor norms, where then the any contract executed by the FEs with the immigrant as well as with the RAs has to be adequately supported and as per the policy. Then such kind of exploitations can be avoided in certain way. And now the main role of overseas placement is interested in a technology and this digital platform, and FEs are a felicitator. So RS liabilities should be bare minimum. Lifelong RA should not be responsible, because we have a system in place. You have a regulatory norms in place. We have Indian missions there. They are connected with this immigrate. So if all these rectifications done, there will be minimum exploitation, I believe. This is what the message I wanted to convey to the Ministry of External Affairs. Mr. Vinay is there. The RF fraternity is keep on sending all these suggestions to rectify. So there should be a regular feature of rectification in the immigrate system accordingly. Thank you, Sarabi, for inviting me again to participate in this.
Yeah, Mr. Abdul Karim, I would like to make a small point. So if
Yes,
you
sir.
have any of your pending issue as far as any technical functionality is concerned, please let me know, maybe here or maybe separately, maybe through email. So we will promptly try our best to take it up.
Thank you, Mr. Vinay. Thank you. We are doing that. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so with that, we have come towards the close of today's discussion. We had a very interesting panel, which started with giving a general picture from the GCC side to listening to Paulo's presentation about the actual picture in each of these GCC countries, to hearing from TransGuard on what FEs think they are doing with respect to employment situation in the destination and their expectation from the origin country, and then hearing our team from the eMigrate and Mr. Abdul Karim, who raised questions about the substitution being done by FEs at destinations and what measures can be taken to sort of improve the situation with respect to the role played by FEs in the recruitment process. We had very interesting questions from the floor as well. So we've made note of whatever questions and queries that you've made in terms of addressing them. And if need be, we'll do another round of consultations with more FEs as well, so that we can have a more vibrant discussion, just hearing in terms of different country perspectives and hearing from more and more employers. So those are some of the thoughts as we come towards the close of this particular discussion. But I thank you all for joining today's discussion. To our distinguished panel, Mohammed had to leave because of some prior engagement, but thank you to all of you who have joined us today. Thank you to the wonderful audience who were very engaging and continuously kept giving us their thoughts in the chat box as well as during the Q&A. And to all our regular participants, thank you all. We came back after a month's time, but we'll keep up the momentum now. So thank you all for joining. Before we close, I'll request all of you to turn on your cameras so that we could take a virtual group snap, and then we'll close.